Parents of Reddit, what is the creepiest thing your kid or kids has ever said or done? My husband is a farmer. One night he asked me to pick him up after working ground, and it was pretty late, around 10 o'clock. So I loaded our 2 girls up, then 4 and 2, and headed to the field. We get to the field and C is finishing up his last round, so we had to wait for a minute. I rolled the windows down in the van and shut the engine off. After a few minutes my 2-year-old says, "Mommy, who dat man outside?" I said, "I don't see a man. Is your Ken doll on the floor?" My 4-year-old then piped up, "He's right outside your door and staring at you. He's scary. He has blood on his face." That's when I turned the key, rolled the windows up, locked the doors, and called my husband and told him to hurry the hell up because the girls are terrified and there's apparently a scary man outside my door that I can't see, but both girls are describing him and what he's doing. Thankfully C was done and heading up to the van at that moment and we left. My girls are now 5 and 7 and they both still remember that man and refuse to go to that particular field. I have to ask my mill to watch them when I need to pick their daddy up from there. Alone with my 4-year-old Midwestern daughter when she randomly whispers, "Ope, she's here," while staring out a dark window. My 4-year-old likes to play this make-believe game where she is having a baby and needs it cut out of her. We have never explained to her what a C-section is. Then the baby always has some sort of deformity, like no eyes or arms or something, and she needs to try again to have a better baby, and she is just going to throw the bad one out. My wife and I have refused to play this game with her once we noticed the pattern, but now she is drafting her younger sister into it, and they love it. I'm torn between making them stop or just being happy they are playing so nicely together. Edit. After seeing some comments, I will add that my wife and I do not let our kids watch YouTube unattended. We have discussed this weird game with our daughter and do monitor it, but overall it just seems harmless despite its creepiness. I overheard a girl tell her mom, "Her eyes are pretty," referring to the new daycare employee. "I wanna wear them on my charm bracelet." My niece and nephew were 13 and 15 at the time and we were watching them for my brother-in-law while he was out of town. At about 3 AM I get shaken and awake to 2 visibly upset teens who start sobbing about a dead woman trying to get in my niece's bedroom window. This jolts my husband out of bed in a hurry. He grabs his handgun and tells me to stay with the kids. They live in a mobile home that sits on risers, so this window is roughly 9 feet at its base. He goes down the hallway and I hear him shout, "What the fuck?" and run back to the front door and outside. Now the niece and nephew are losing their minds, not wanting their uncle getting hurt, so I call the cops and walk to the door to see what's going on. The dead woman was in fact a woman hopped out of her mind on who knows what, naked, and she did very much look like a corpse. She had been standing on the roof of my truck, trying to see in the windows. My cousin who is 3, he keeps referring to any woman he sees as tasty. We would be watching a movie and he would point out a woman and says she is tasty. What he means is that she is beautiful. I can't even walk with him outside because I'm afraid he might point out to some woman and say that she is tasty. My 4-year-old son had a habit of announcing when he had to use the bathroom. He would say, "I gotta go potty." One time he makes his business known and heads off toward the bathroom. He returns seconds later and says there's already someone in the bathroom. Now I do know for a fact that it's just the 2 of us home, so the hair stands up on my neck. I ask him, "What do you mean?" He repeats, "There's already someone in the bathroom." Now I'm thinking, is it someone I see dead people or someone in a hockey goalie mask? So I grab the biggest knife from my knife block and tell him to stay here. I walk to the bathroom, take a wide angle to see in. Nobody. Slowly and quietly walk toward the shower and pull back the curtain. Nothing. By now my son has walked around the corner and I ask him, "Where did you see the person?" He points to an unflushed toilet and says, "See, someone's already here." His big brother didn't flush the toilet. So, my son and I stood watching his then 2-year-old daughter as she stood looking, laughing, and chatting away in toddler gibberish at nothing in a completely empty hallway. We just watched her and looked at each other with the WTF look on our faces. Same granddaughter, some years later, still sleeps with me when she visits because that girl scares her. That's all she'll say, because evidently the girl told her not to tell anyone about her. My 3-year-old, while eating dinner, told me there was a man on the balcony with red eyes with his mouth gaping open, like a scream face. We live on the 3rd floor and the only access to that balcony is from inside. Needless to say, I didn't turn around. Has said so much weird things. We live in a really old apartment, and I don't believe in ghosts, but he creeps me out. Edit. He's also mentioned a little boy upside down scratching at the ceiling, just casually like it was nothing. On the meantime, I'm shitting myself. We've always been careful about not watching anything scary or reading scary books, but as soon as she was old enough to really talk, about 2.5, she told us randomly one day, "I used to live in a different house with a mommy and a brother named John. I was older than I'm now. One day I was on the bridge looking into the water when a witch came up and scratched out my eyes. I fell in the water and drowned, and then I came to you. I don't believe in past lives or anything, and I know kids are just highly suggestible, but that gave me the damn creeps." Back in the mid-60s, my cousin's family lived out near the ocean on the coast of Japan. It wasn't so built up back then, and they lived near a rocky cliff where a small lighthouse sat. My cousin was maybe 8 at the time, but he was sort of obsessed with turtles. He had a pet turtle with an odd name, and he took very good care of it, to the point where he didn't have much of a social life. It was a wild turtle he'd caught, and since he was missing out on socializing anyway, his parents eventually convinced him to let the turtle go. He let it go in a small pond nearby, but he'd go out to talk to it every day. Anyway, one day there was a big downburst coming up from the sea. It came out of nowhere and was absolutely ferocious. My cousin was caught out in the open and ran to the lighthouse for protection. The storm passed in a few minutes, but the sea was so ferocious that the lighthouse crumbled under the waves. My cousin was found slightly dazed but unharmed, sitting a few hundred yards from the rubble. Anyway, my cousin doesn't remember this today, but his parents told me that he wouldn't shut up about how his turtle had turned giant, come out of the sea, and caught him before flying away. His English wasn't the best, but he just kept repeating the same thing. Gamma is friend to children. Not a parent, but my cousin is. This was about last year. For an on-sake, I'll call him Dave. We were out on an all-day fishing trip and told me that if I wanted to spend the night at his place, I was more than welcome to. Not seeing him in a while and still wanting to shoot the shit, I said sure. He lives in a rancho with his wife of 2 years and their 7-year-old son. He's a good part older than me. When we got back to his place, we had dinner, watched TV, normal things with nothing eventful happening. Eventually his wife and son went to bed, which left us alone in the living room. That's when I asked him, "You liking this place so far?" Mind you, the last time we saw each other, he was living in a different place at the time. He said yeah, but was making a face that you could tell he wanted to say more. He eventually followed up with, "Don't get me wrong, this place is great, but there's just something weird about it. I don't know what it is." Which I told him it's a new place and he probably hasn't gotten used to it quite yet. He agreed and we went back to watching some show. When we could faintly hear his son talking, we just look at each other and dismiss it, thinking he was talking in his sleep or something. An hour goes by and it's getting late and Dave can still hear his son talking, so he decides to check on him as to why he's up. He enters his son's room with a "Hey buddy, why are you?" This is followed up by him shuffling to pick up his son and carry him out, slamming on the door and waking his wife and sending us all out of the house. I'm obviously freaked. Dave is freaked. His wife, Jen, is groggy and confused, but their son is just poker face about the whole situation. No reaction. As soon as I know we are all out on the sidewalk in front of his house, when he asks me to call the police, I oblige, not even thinking if it was a prank, and wait. I ask him, "What happened, man?" Took him a while to gather a response, then he looked at me with the weirdest facial expression and said he was on his bed sitting up talking towards a closet. When I looked over to see what was in there, I saw an old man, and I swear to God, man, he was smiling at me. He was tearing up as he was telling me this. Police arrive. They check the house. No sign of entry at all. Everything except the front door is locked. When everything was said and done, Dave made everyone sleep out in the living room at night. I went home, and 4 months after that night, they moved. I see him even more, since he ended up moving closer to me. I asked him if he moved because of the man he saw, and he'll just shrug it off, almost like he saw him again. Either way, something happened that night. Now his son plays Fortnite, so you decide what's creepier.